All right, gang, we're back with our third lecture in our week 11 series. The last topic I want to talk about is push versus pull strategies. So let me top line these, then we'll get into our learning objectives and give you a few flowchart examples. This is a pretty brief lecture. Push strategies. Push strategies is when you, as a producer of a product, a maker of a thing, put your marketing dollars and efforts towards getting retailers to stock and carry your product. And you'll see this in the Pepsi example that's part of your assignment for this week. With a push strategy, it's really a business-to-business strategy. You're a business, a maker of a thing, a producer, and you're trying to get that product, you're trying to sell it to retailers, get them to write orders and purchase your product, get them to stock and carry your product, and then they in turn will sell it to the final consumer. So push strategies, you typically have salespeople and you're marketing to retailers. You're not marketing to final consumers. Your marketing efforts are again to get those retailers to stock and carry your product. So it's any tactic that results in a third party stocking your product. Pull strategies, by comparison, are focused on final consumers. Here you're trying to get consumers to go to a retailer to purchase your product. Let me give you a quick example. There was a day when pharmaceutical companies were not allowed to advertise on TV. This is probably before most of your time, but somewhere around in the 70s, legislations changed and the Food and Drug Administration allowed pharmaceutical companies to advertise on TV. Before that legislation, the only way pharmaceutical companies could promote their products was to promote it to the doctor's offices or the HMOs, the health maintenance organizations that hired all and managed all of those doctors. So they would do only push strategies and focus all their marketing efforts and dollars to try to get those doctors' offices and those HMO organizations to stock and carry their prescription versus a competing prescription. The legislation changed, and now pharmaceutical companies can advertise on TV. So now they can promote their products directly to consumers, but the consumer still has to go to a doctor's office to get a prescription for that product. They can't order it directly over the counter. They still have to go to that retailer, the doctor's office, to get the product. And we've seen these ads. It shows somebody who's got a frowny face and they're down because they have some kind of skin allergy, or they're depressed, or their muscles hurt, or they want to lose weight. List all the side effects, which include possible death and blindness, and it's actually worse than the ailment that you started with. And then after, they show people kind of smiling and running through the flower fields, and they're happy and everybody's better. Pharmaceutical companies now use both push and pull campaigns to promote their products, and they've shifted a lot of their marketing dollars into pull tactics to promote directly to the consumer, and then the consumer will hopefully go to a retailer to get the product. So big companies, in your example this week, you have a case study from Pepsi where you see that they're using both push and pull strategies. So that's the difference between those two. And here's your learning objectives. I want you to understand the difference between push versus pull strategies, and I just top line those for you, and be able to recognize a push versus a pull campaign out in the marketplace. Many companies, if they sell to retailers, if a retailer is where you bought that product, they most likely have some push money, push campaigns. They have salespeople, they're giving incentives to the retailers, meaning discounts to buy their product. They're giving those retailers money towards their own marketing efforts that they do, like mailers and postcards. That's all what we call push money, push campaigns. And they might also be running general advertising to the general public, pull campaigns. So this slide gives you a quick flow chart that kind of shows how a push campaign works and what the different components are. So you could be pushing to a wholesaler, or to a wholesaler who in turn also promotes to a retailer. So maybe you sell your product to a wholesaler and you're pushing to the wholesaler. And the wholesaler in turn is responsible for selling it to the retailers, and they might have their own push campaigns. So there can be layers. Then pull campaigns is focused again on the final consumer. So the best way to understand the difference between push versus pull: push is focused on intermediaries or retailers. Pull is focused on the final consumers. Easy to understand. The other topic to cover in this lecture is setting the promotional budget. So there's two common ways of setting the marketing budget. And when you think about marketing budgets, how much do you set aside to market your company's products and services? There's lots of different budget methods, but these are two of the most common: percent of sales and task method. Percent of sales simply takes whatever your sales are. We're going to take a percent, and 5% is a pretty common number. We're going to take 5% of sales and allocate that to our marketing budget. This type of budget structure works well if you're in a retail chain where you have lots of locations, and especially if some of them are company owned and some of them might be franchise owned. This way it's equitable, everybody's paying their fair share, and you have a percent of sales. Now, percent of sales can have some problems, however. How do you set up a budget if you're going into a new market where you don't have any prior sales, or you're opening new locations that don't have any prior sales? Then you have to have some type of task or allocation of money up front. Also, what do you think happens to your marketing budget if sales start to decline? Maybe you're just having a bad year. Maybe you're in the process of coming up with some new products, but until those new products come out, your sales are declining for that fiscal year. Or you've had some bad press and sales are down. If your sales are down and you're using a percent of sale budget, what does that mean for your budget the following year? It's going to be less, right? Because it's a percent of sales. So if your sales go down 20% one year, then your budget goes down 20% the next year. So now you have less money to market your company's products and services the following year. What happens when you have less marketing dollars to spend to advertise your products? You're probably going to have even less sales. And when you have less sales, then your marketing budget declines and declines. So we call this a death spiral of percent of sales. So companies will use a percent of sales, but they might have some type of floor to it that we're not going to spend below X, because we know that we can start creating a downward spiral. Percent of sales doesn't work for every type of business. Sometimes you have to do a task method. We're trying to go in this new market. Here's what it's going to cost. This is separate from digital advertising, and we're going to get into that later in the course. I've got some weeks set aside to talk about things like click-through rates and how they set budgets and break-even cost per click and all that good stuff. So stay tuned for that. These are the two most common budgeting methods: percent of sales or task method based on here's what it's going to cost to advertise in a new market or launch this new product. Okay. So that's pretty straightforward. Again, you have a quiz this week, and that step 4 of the marketing plan is also due this week. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.